Merry meet fairy souls. I'm back with more Zodiac myths. Pisces, Cancer, Scorpio. It seems that we are in the world of the water signs. One of the reasons why the ancient Greeks knew the star sky and the constellations so well was because Greek culture was very much intertwined with seafaring, so the art of astronomy was very important for the survival and for the cultural identity. Greece wasn't one big country back then, it was a collection of independent city-states, and in all these states they had their own gods and goddesses that the people worshipped. This is also what makes Greek mythology is so compelling. If you wish to hear more myths, check out my People of the Bear course, which is all about bear in mythology and folklore around the world. Ancient Greece included and the bear connections to Artemis. You can find all my courses at fairychamber.com. And now, Fairy Chamber Podcast, the Zodiac Mythology. Constellations, they were known all around the ancient world, and the constellation inspirations for the ancient Greeks, many of them came from Egypt and ancient Babylonia, and the constellation of Aquarius, the water power, that is no different. It is believed that it originates from Egypt, where the water power was a divinity of the Nile. Because the Nile was sacred, the life of Egyptians depended on the Nile, and fertility of the land depended on the Nile and the floods of the Nile. But this deity, it probably dates to Babylonia, where there was a water divinity that was a male guardian of the rivers. In the world of ancient Greece, there was lots of these statues that represented water pourers in the temples of the gods and goddesses. And there was one very famous one in the temple of Zeus in Olympia. All the Greek speakers, if I pronounce these names wrong, I apologize. Once again, native Finnish speaker, and I never studied Greek. I know a few words in Greek. Anyway, in Greek, the Aquarius is called hydrokos. It can mean a vessel, and it can also mean a person. So hydrokos, it naturally refers into someone who is pouring water. The first myth about the Aquarius is about a cupbearer called Ganymedes, and he was a beautiful young man, and he was the son of the king of Troy. And there were two kings who had huge crush on Ganymedes, and those were King Minos and King Tantalus. But in the end, neither one of them got him. It was actually Zeus who got Ganymedes to himself. He was so obsessed with him that he sent an eagle to pick him up from the earth and bring him to the Mount Olympus, where Zeus turned him into immortal. And for eternity, Ganymedes, he serves as a cupbearer of the gods in Mount Olympus, and one of Zeus's many lovers. Like in many Greek myths, the competition about Ganymedes, it led into a fight. Zeus paid a great price for Laomedon, who was Ganymedes' father, and he gave him these swift, fast horses, immortal horses, and they were delivered by the North Wind himself. Laomedon, he hired gods Apollo and Poseidon to build the walls of Troy, but he did not agree to pay for them because he was a shifty character. But of course, if you ask favor for a god, they will not do anything for free. So Poseidon, he raised up this massive sea monster to destroy Laomedon and whole Troy, and only way that Laomedon could get away from this was to sacrifice his daughter Hesione. But then Laomedon, he heard that great hero Hercules was around, and he asked Hercules to fight against the sea monster, and Hercules did it with a very clever way. he let the sea monster to swallow him, and then he cut his throat from inside. And Hercules went to receive his reward, but once again Laomedon he cheated. Hercules did not accept this, so he brought a huge army to Troy and destroyed the whole city. He was there fighting with a hero Telamon, who was also the grandchild of god Zeus, and in the end Hesione was given as a reward for Telamon. But the ancient Babylonians, the water-bearer could have been female or male, and for the ancient Greece, this idea of a female water-bearer is Hebe. Hebe was the daughter of Hera and goddess of youth, and after Hercules had finished all his 12 labors, Hera had no other ways than to give him her daughter as a reward. Basically, when Hercules receives this woman who is goddess of youth, eternal youth, it's one another way to highlight his status as hero who lives forever and the greatest hero of all time. But if you read stories of Hercules, he is very much flaunted person. There is a third story of the water pourer, which has way more Christian influences, and it comes from the later era of Greek polytheism. It's about a man called Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha. So according to the story, Zeus became fed up with human race and he sent massive floods to destroy all men. Then when Zeus had come down, he decided to repopulate the world again, and he gave task for Deucalion and Pyrrha. They threw stones to the earth, and from those stones people rose. This story comes from the last century before Christ was born, which probably explains it. Aquarius, it is an air sign fixed by Saturn. I always find this very interesting because I naturally think that Aquarius is a water sign, but I guess it's not, it's an air sign. Aquarius people, they tend to be somewhat uncontroversial. They like to break boundaries. They are innovators, independent. Sometimes they can be fanatic and stubborn. When it comes to our Western horoscopes, most of them are inspired by Greek mythology. They were born when the Greek astronomers tried to explain the constellations and the symbolism behind them. So that's the whole idea behind the 12 zodiac signs that we have. And the constellation of Pisces, if you have ever seen that in the skies, it has two fishes. And they are chained together with these dots of stars. And that chain, it actually comes from the story of Andromeda, which was a princess who was chained into a stone to be sacrificed to a sea monster, and the hero Perseus saved her. But that's another story. So in the star sky, the constellation of Pisces, it's right below Andromeda, because the Pisces hold the chain where she's chained to the rock. This constellation of two fishes, it was already known in ancient Syria and Babylonia and in Egypt. And this, when the Greeks, they explained all the constellations with different myths, Pisces is the only one that doesn't really have a Greek myth from the time period when all the other constellations had their own Greek myth. But the story behind Pisces, that goes all the way back to Syria. It goes all the way back to Syrian goddess Atargatis, and I have a video made about Atargatis, who was also the first mermaid. I personally really like all the stories about her because I find her very fascinating. I will put a link to the description box so you can check that out. So Atargatis was this sea goddess, and in Greek mythology she is often compared to Aphrodite. According to some sources, that's where Aphrodite even got her name from. Who knows? But definitely there's some connection between them. So the myth of Atargatis tells about this goddess who dives into the sea because of a broken heart, and she's so beautiful that the sea does not want to kill her, but instead she transforms and she turns into a goddess who has a mermaid tail. So she becomes half fish. The cult of Atargatis was very popular in ancient Syria, and it traveled all across the ancient world during different time periods. So Atargatis was really worshipped about 3,000, 4,000 years ago in ancient Assyria. And when the Greek Empire got larger and larger, they took more elements from different cultures. Atargati, she traveled into Greece and she became a goddess called Derketo. And Derketo was very much connected to Aphrodite. The name Derketo, that literally means a Syrian goddess. There is a Syrian tale that was also known in ancient Greece, and in the tale there was two fishes in the river Euphrates. If someone does not know, it's a very, very long river that runs through Iraq, Syria and Turkey. But anyway, these two fishes, they found an egg from the sea and they put that egg to the shore. And from that egg the goddess Derketo was emerged. And to honor these fishes who saved her, she created the constellation of the Pisces and put the Pisces into the skies for everyone to remember. Then there's another Syrian tale. Derketo, she fell into a pond and then a fish saved her. The Syrian myths, they belong to the oldest layer of this whole story behind Pisces. But then there is also a myth that comes from the Hellenistic age of ancient Greece. Hellenistic age that took place about 300, 200 BC. That was the time of the Greek colonization when the Greek Empire was at its largest in Southern Europe and then in Asia Minor. And at that time the Greeks, they invaded Egypt, and there was this pressure to explain why these Egyptian gods all had half animal, half human forms when all the Greek gods only had human forms. Of course, they were all shapeshifters, like we all know from Zeus. The story of Pisces became one explanation for this. And according to the myth, the Greek gods, they were threatened by the horrible monster Typhon, who was creating massive storms, and all the gods and goddesses, they had to flee and change themselves into animals. Then Aphrodite and her son Eros, they now dived into the Euphrates river and became fishes or half fishes. And this has another connection to this story of Atargatis, who was half woman, half mermaid. So in this myth, Aphrodite becomes half woman, half mermaid. Also from this myth there is a version that two fishes came and saved Aphrodite and Eros, and to thank them Aphrodite placed them into the skies and they became a constellation of Pisces. And there's some very interesting symbolism behind this myth. You know, according to one story, Aphrodite really cared about these fishes and she did not want them to ever get separated from each other, so that's why she chained them together or gave them this chain so that they would never be apart. But then Aphrodite, being the goddess of love, not just erotic love, like many people consider her to be goddess of only erotic love, but she's goddess of all love. And her son Eros is also god of love. So when Aphrodite and Eros dive into the Euphrates, they don't want to be lost from each other either. That's why they have the chain. So it's very interesting myth. I know few people who are Pisces, and I always feel that they are very balanced. I might be very off because, you know, I'm a Virgo rising Scorpio, but I also always feel that Pisces are very balanced. Zodiac of Pisces, it is ruled by the planet Jupiter. The story of Pisces, it is this very interesting mixture between Greek, Egyptian and Syrian mythologies. The constellation of the Cancer, that was already known for the ancient Egyptians, but for them its symbol was not a crab, it was actually a beetle. Anyone who is familiar with Egyptian mythology knows that beetles, they were very, very sacred animals there. The myth behind this whole constellation of the Cancer in the star sky, that actually came from the 12 labors of Hercules. And one of them was to kill the Hydra. Hydra was a water snake that lived in the marshes of Lerna. And it was a terrible creature who had tons of heads, and when you killed one head or chopped off one head, a new head would grow, or two heads would grow. And there's different versions of how many heads there actually was. According to one legend there was 100 heads, and according to another legend there was 9 heads. Hercules arrived with his nephew Iolaus, who was driving their chariot. Hercules went to the den of the Hydra, which was in the top of a mountain, and first he shot an arrow inside to its cave, and it was a fiery arrow, so that woke up the Hydra, who came out in its all monstrous form. In Greek mythology, most of the stories about Hercules, they are really about his struggles, competition against his stepmother Hera, because Hercules was born from an union between Zeus and a mortal woman called Alcmene, who was already married, and she got pregnant, and this made Hera, the Zeus's wife, so mad that she tried to kill Hercules even before he was born. But Hercules was born, and he was named Hercules, which means glorious gift of Hera. So all the myths about Hercules, they tend to be about his competition against his stepmother, who was always trying to kill him. When Hercules was fighting against Hydra, he coiled himself up into one of Hydra's legs. And now all the animals, they were either against or for Hercules. Like most of the animals, they were on the side of Hercules. They wanted Hercules to win. But then there was one animal that was on the side of Hera, and that was the crab. It was an immense giant crab who with its pincers snapped Hercules' leg, which must have been very painful. But the crab could not hold on to Hercules, and because Hercules had his other leg free, he crashed the shelter of the crab, and the crab died. Goddess Athena appeared to help Hercules. She told him to send Iolaus to the forest and bring a burning tree branch, so each time when Hercules chopped one of the Hydra's head off, they should burn the wound and it would not regrow. And then as a trophy, he dipped all his arrows into Hydra's poison, which was very, very dangerous. And he used them later on in his journeys. But Hera did not forget the crab who had helped her to fight against her stepson, and that's why she put the constellation of the crab to the sky. It's quite interesting now when we think about Greek myths. We never really see Hera completely evil goddess. I think she is pushed to be evil because of the circumstances. Because if you know any Greek myths, Zeus is the worst husband that you can ever have. The story of all the fights between Hercules and Hera, they are not completely evil, and they are not completely good. They are somewhere in between, like us mortals. No one is completely good or completely evil. So it's very interesting psychologically to think of these Greek myths, and well, any myth, because they always have these supplement layers within them. It's very interesting, the whole symbolism behind the Cancer, because the crab in the story is loyal to Hera, and that's why they get promoted after they die. They get to be in the sky as the constellation. When I did research for this video, I went to look all the personal traits of the Cancers, and quite often they came out that Cancers are very loyal. Also that Cancers are very maternal, very nurturing, or paternal, very nurturing and very caring. I know quite a few Cancers, and I think this is quite true. They can be very sensitive and very understanding, and the sensitiveness that is also connected to the elemental of water because Cancer is one of the water signs, and water signs tend to be very emotional and be very in touch with their feelings, which also is a very good trait. And I think Cancers, they are pretty good at reading people. The constellation of Scorpio, that was known in the ancient world. It was known by the Babylonians and by the Egyptians. And Egyptians, they connected the Scorpio constellation to the goddess Selk. And Babylonians and the Greeks, they knew this constellation already in the late 6th century. So this is an old story. First of all the Greek people who watch this, if I pronounce these names totally wrong, I apologize. Native Finnish speaker here. I can only say Efkaristo and Kalimera. Yes, this story is connected to one of my favorite Greek goddesses, that is Artemis, who rocks. This story is about a giant Orion and how he was born and what kind of life he lived. So it starts from the town of Hyria, where there was a local hero called Hyrios. And this was the time when all these pagan gods, they could disguise themselves as humans, and they walked among humans. And this is very, very common in all myths around the world. This is a universal myth that gods could disguise themselves as humans. You can find this from Baltic mythology, Greek mythology, Finnish mythology, African mythology, everywhere. But it's really interesting. So there was two people who came to Hyrios and asked for shelter, and these were Zeus and Poseidon, none less, and Hermes. Hyrios, he entertained his 3 guests, and they really enjoyed his company. And Hyrios, he sacrificed one of his oxes for his guests to eat. And soon these gods, they find out that Hyrios, he really wanted to have a son, but he was childless. So what they did, they took this pile of meat of dead ox, and the gods, they urinated to the ox. And they told Hyrios to bury the meat. And 9 months later, a gigantic infant found its way out from the ground, and it was Orion the giant. Orion is also known as the Great Hunter. His legend is connected to Island of Crete and also to this whole island of Aegean Sea. Like, he's connected to the sea very much because in a way he is son of all 3 gods. He's son of Zeus, he's son of Poseidon, and he's son of Hermes. So he is like a very powerful creature, and he's especially connected to Poseidon. There are lots of stories about Orion, and according to one legend, because he had this strong connection to Poseidon, he could walk upon water. Another thing that was later adopted to another religions, there's one myth that he could walk upon the seabed, and his head would be like above the waves. One day Orion arrived to Chios, which was a place that was ruled by Oenopion, who was a son of Dionysus, the god of wine. This island, it was very fertile, and there were like grape vines growing everywhere. But it happened that Orion and Oenopion, they did not get along. There was huge fight between them. According to some legends, Orion was pursuing Oenopion's wife. According to other legend, he was pursuing his daughter Merope. Oenopion, he did something that was very common for his father to do. He got Orion very drunk, and then he plucked his eyes, and then Orion, he woke up from the seashore and he was blind. He managed to find his way to a forge of a blacksmith, and then he managed to convince this blacksmith called Gedalion to guide him. So this young guy, he climbed to his shoulders and made him guide him towards the rising sun. And then the moment when the sun rays touched his eyes, Orion, he got his eyesight back. And then he went on his way to destroy Oenopion. But Oenopion, he was saved by Poseidon, who managed to guide him into a subterranean chamber where Orion could not reach. Then we come to the connection between Artemis and Orion. There are many versions of this myth. There's one story that tells that Orion, he was part of the hunter group of Artemis because Artemis was the hunter goddess and she respected his hunting skills. And one day he tried to rape her and she killed him. There is another story that Orion, he fell in love with a human and gods really resented this and they sent Artemis to kill him. In 200 BC, Istros, the Greek writer, he wrote his own version of the story, and according to him, Artemis was in love with Orion, but Apollo, the twin brother of Artemis, killed Orion because he did not want his sister to be together with the giant. But this myth, it comes from Hellenistic age, which itself was very patriarchal, and from a time period when Greek women didn't really have that many rights. And the more further you go in Greek mythology, the more clear it comes that Artemis only had affairs with women. Then we go back in time to the early poem of Hesiod, and he tells a poem that has astronomical meaning, and it's a story of Orion, how he got killed by a Scorpio. This is a story from Crete, and according to that, Artemis, who often had male companions while hunting without having any kind of erotic relationships with them, she was hunting with Orion, and Orion was boasting that he could kill every single creature on the earth. But the Earth Mother, I suppose, Gaia, she heard this and she sent a giant Scorpio which bit Orion and killed him. Thank you so much for listening. Take care and make good choices.